President Trump backing off his threats to impose tariffs on at least one of America's three largest trading partners today. The president confirmed an agreement with Mexico's president to delay those tariffs by 1 month. Trump also spoke with Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, with another conversation scheduled to happen in just a few hours. A reminder for our viewers here. Tariffs against Canada and China are still scheduled to take effect tomorrow. Now, those moves from the White House look to be having an effect on the market. You can see that there. This is a live look at the Dow Jones Industrial. At one point, the Dow fell more than 550 points. CBS News senior White House correspondent Weijia Zhang joins us now for more. And Mexico says the conversation with Trump was a productive one. How did the two come to this agreement in the first place?
Well, we always knew that this was likely coming, this conversation, because it started as soon as President Trump took office and he made the threats of these tariffs against Mexico and Canada. And so we do know that President Trump spoke with Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum on the phone, and it ended with a pause in the tariffs. And those stock numbers that you pointed to, no doubt a factor in this, because you can really see in real time how it could potentially not only affect the U.S. economy, but the global one as well. And so Mexico has agreed to do more at the border, to send in more of its guards at the southern border to ensure that there is a decrease of migration. Of course, all of this is a political tool that the president has used many times to try to get other countries to align with his goals. And of course, the border is among his top priorities here. And so we'll see if the tariffs actually go into effect in 1 month. But for now, they are paused to see what kind of progress can be made to stop the flow of migrants.
Okay, Weijia, I want to talk about the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio. He's on the move today, making his first international trip since being confirmed to the role. And just moments ago, he touched down in El Salvador. What are we expecting to see from that visit?
Well, we know that the secretary made some news. He confirmed the reporting of our colleague, Jennifer Jacobs, who had just reported minutes before that he would become the acting administrator of USAID. Of course, that is an aid organization here based in Washington that helps millions and millions of people across the world. And Elon Musk and his Doge agency had threatened to completely shut it down, which we know now is not happening. And so Rubio talked about that, about how he would be spearheading the effort to sort of reorganize that organization, and said there would likely be a reduction in workforce and a different amount of aid, but that it would not be shut down altogether. So he spoke about that. We also know that he is going to be talking to the president of El Salvador, which is a critical country for this administration in order to carry out its goals on immigration. Because when you're talking about mass deportations at the scale that the president wants, you have to think about where are the migrants going to go. And so he will be trying to convince the president there to accept migrants that are not Salvadorian, that are not nationals, but to accept people there as a safe haven for them instead of waiting out their cases here in the U.S. So that is a big topic of conversation today.
Let's talk about Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth. We know he's visiting the southern border for his first trip since being confirmed. What do we know about his goal there?
Well, we know that he made this announcement himself on X, and he said that I'll be visiting our troops at the southern border. He said POTUS wants 100% operational control of the border, and we will deliver. Secretary Hegseth went on to say border security is national security in all caps. So essentially this is an information gathering trip, I imagine, because he wants to see what these servicemen and women are doing. He wants to report back to President Trump about the resources there and what more the military can do. And he has already said many times that the military would assist in this endeavor in any way possible. What we don't know is exactly how many troops could be heading to the southern border and exactly what additional troops will be there. We know that on day one, the president signed an executive order sending about 1,500 troops there. And part of what they are doing is continuing construction of the border wall and offering any assistance to enforcement that is required.
Okay, Weijia Zhang, thank you so much for your time today. As we mentioned, Secretary of State Marco Rubio has been named the acting director of the agency of USAID. And we also know USAID will now merge into the State Department. This comes after a morning of uncertainty for staffers. They were told not to come into work just this morning.
Of USAID,
I'm the acting director of USAID. I've delegated that authority to someone, but I stay in touch with him. And again, our goal was to go in and align our foreign aid to the national interest. But if you go to mission after mission and embassy after embassy around the world, you will often find that in many cases, USAID is involved in programs that run counter to what we're trying to do in our national strategy with that country or with that region. That cannot continue. USAID is not an independent, non-governmental entity. It is an entity that spends taxpayer dollars, and it needs to spend it, as the statute says, in alignment with the policy directives that they get from the Secretary of State, the National Security Council, and the President. And it's been 20 or 30 years where people have tried to reform it, and it refuses to reform. It refuses to cooperate. When we were in Congress, we couldn't even get answers to basic questions about programs. That will not continue. That's not going to continue.
Elon Musk has called it a terrorist organization. Do you believe that?
I've articulated to you my challenges with it, and they go back to my time in Congress. Okay, we would ask them questions. Who does this program fund? Who gets the money? We won't tell you. We don't need to tell you. We're apolitical. Well, American foreign policy isn't apolitical. American foreign policy is to further the interest of the United States. If someone wants to spend apolitical dollars, they should spend private dollars, go start a charity, and you can fund anyone you want. But if you're going to spend taxpayer money, then you need to spend it in furtherance of the national interest of the United States. That's exactly what I said at my confirmation hearing. And this is not my frustration. This frustration has existed now for almost a quarter century in multiple administrations that have gone through this challenge. It's going to stop and it's going to end.
Can you tell us a little bit about the canal conversation you had?
Now, that announcement from Secretary of State Marco Rubio that he's been named acting administrator of USAID all comes after Elon Musk took to X Spaces last night, voicing criticism of the agency. He called it, quote, a ball of worms and beyond repair. And he also said he wants to shut down the agency. Musk, as you know, is the head of President Trump's Department of Government Efficiency, also known as DOGE. USAID dispenses billions of dollars every year across the world. According to the U.S. state department, the agency dispensed $68 billion in global aid in 2023, and $17 billion of that went to Ukraine for economic stabilization, keeping electric plants running and paying government employees. But it's not just Ukraine we're talking about here. USAID assists about 130 countries. Other top recipients include Ethiopia, Jordan, the Democratic Republic of Congo, and Somalia. And more than 10,000 employees worldwide work under the USAID agency. A congressional delegation is holding a press conference right now at USAID headquarters about what they call the far-reaching consequences of the Trump administration and Elon Musk's shutdown of the U.S. Agency for International Development. We will monitor that news conference and bring you any updates from that event. But right now, crews are working to remove the wreckage in Washington, D.C.'s Potomac River from last week's deadly collision between a plane and an Army helicopter. We have video from just moments ago of salvage crews picking up part of the fuselage from the American Airlines plane. So far, they've also removed one of the plane's two engines. Remember, 67 people were killed in Wednesday's crash. And authorities say they've recovered 55 bodies so far. So let's bring in CBS News correspondent Skylar Henry at Reagan National Airport. Welcome, Skylar. Thanks for being here with us today. What are operations looking like right now, and how long are you hearing this could take?
Hey there, good to be with you as always. Well, this process could very well take days. Tentatively, D.C. Unified Command, along with the Army Corps of Engineers, has indicated that this process could very well take somewhere around 9 to 10 days to complete. They say that their main focus right now, as of the first several days, will be recovering parts of the aircraft. They say that because this is still a recovery mission, that could slow some of the process as it relates to salvaging the actual parts of the plane itself, as they are still looking to ID 12 of those who perished following last week's collision. As you pointed out, at least one of the plane's engines has been recovered up till this point. The middle part of the plane's fuselage as well. Apparently the wing of the plane is also in this part where crews are actively working right now. They say that there are still at least 2 other main areas that they are looking to work through as they look to put the tail part of the plane as well as the front where the cockpit is on a barge before that is all taken to a nearby hangar for the NTSB to continue their investigation. But then they will then shift their focus to recovering the military Black Hawk helicopter, as well as officials look to try to determine exactly what went wrong here. And that includes getting more information from the flight data recorders that were on board the chopper, as well as and whether that could give them any sort of clarity as to just how high the helicopter was at the time of the impact and whether the pilots on board knew how high they were.
And Skylar, I want to talk about the families affected by this tragedy. We know yesterday some of those family members of victims gathered on the shoreline of the Potomac River for a memorial ceremony. What do we know so far about the victims and what recovery looks like right now as authorities work to remove the debris?
Yeah, well, as I pointed out, this is still very much a recovery process. We know that dive crews are working around the clock to try to identify the 12 of those who have yet to be ID'd as part of the 67 who have lost their lives. As you pointed out, family members, relatives of those who perished were out at the crash site yesterday with police escort. We asked contextually just what that moment was like. Obviously very somber, very sad. We know that family members, according to the NTSB, are very emotional, very frustrated, and even angry about how something like this could happen. It is why officials say that they are doing everything that they can to work on this recovery process, and they actually believe that removing some of the wreckage from the Potomac will help them in this identification process, because they believe that some of the bodies and remains that have yet to be recovered may be either under or nearby where that wreckage might be, and it being lifted out of the way may help them in their process. Still very much a painstaking process. It's also one that is very difficult on the dive crews themselves. One of them had to be taken to a nearby hospital for hypothermia conditions. That diver is okay, but it just goes to show you the challenges, not only for the family members that are out there, but for the crews working around the clock to really work with the salvage recovery and also this investigation.
Yeah, a lot of time and effort being put into all of this. Skylar, over the weekend, the National Transportation Safety Board gave an update on their investigation. Did they reveal anything new? Yeah,
there was new information revealed about what they were able to recover from the flight data box on the CRJ, the commercial regional jet, the American Airlines aircraft. In that, it showed that the plane was flying at around 300 feet, give or take 25 degrees at the time of the impact. We also know that helicopter, that military Black Hawk, was certainly above that 200-foot limit, which is required in this airspace. And so the big question that NTSB says that they are looking to try to figure out is whether the pilots on board the military aircraft knew how high they were. All signs, at least according to the initial data that has been presented that the NTSB told us on Saturday, is that air traffic control operations, their information showed that the military aircraft was flying at around 200 feet. So there's some sort of discrepancy there, where that 350-foot height of the CRJ and the 200-foot height, or altitude, I should say, of the military aircraft, and whether the pilots on board each of those aircraft knew where the other was. This is why they are conducting interviews with the air traffic controllers in the towers at the time of this collision. One of them, a local controller that was in charge of both helicopter and airplanes at the time of this incident. There was an assistant in the control tower as well, helping with that. We also know that there was a ground controller that was interviewed, and the NTSB says that by the end of the day, they will be conducting interviews with the operations supervisor of the air traffic control tower, as well as the operations supervisor in training, all of which drops in the bucket, if you will, to try to get a full, clearer picture and recreate exactly why this happened so that the NTSB could put out recommendations for the FAA, for the military, and also get to the bottom of exactly why this happened.
Yeah, still a lot of questions and unknowns right now. Skylar Henry, thank you so much for your reporting. And from one plane crash to another, authorities now say the 6 passengers killed in that medical jet that crashed in northeast Philly on Friday night were all Mexican citizens. CBS News' Philadelphia Ross DeMotte reports the plane's newly recovered cockpit recorder could help federal investigators figure out exactly what led up to the incident.
Good morning. I'm Ross DeMattei from CBS News in Philadelphia, and we are back at the site of a deadly plane crash, a medical transport jet that crashed right into a residential neighborhood in northeast Philadelphia on Friday evening, killing all 6 people on board that plane, as well as 1 person on the ground, and injuring at least 22 other people who were on the ground. And if you take a look behind me, you can actually still see some of the debris from that crash here at the crash site, as well as the giant crater left behind from the plane's impact. Now, over the weekend, federal investigators were continuing to canvass this massive debris field that spans about 4 to 5 city blocks, and they found the plane's cockpit recorder buried 8 feet inside of the crater where the plane crashed. That black box could be the key to revealing what exactly went wrong on board and caused the Learjet to nosedive less than a minute after takeoff. They also found the plane's enhanced ground proximity warning system, which could contain additional flight data. We're expecting the NTSB to release its preliminary report on this crash in about 30 days' time. In Northeast Philadelphia, I'm Ross DeMattei for CBS News.
Will RFK Jr. be approved to lead the Department of Health and Human Services? What we know right now about a crucial vote set for this week. You're watching CBS News 24/7. Over on Capitol Hill, President Trump's pick to lead the Department of Health and Human Services is up for a crucial committee vote. This week, that vote will determine if Robert F. Kennedy Jr. will advance in the process. But now, 2 Democrats with the potential to hold things up say his most recent financial disclosures are giving them, quote, grave concerns. Senators Elizabeth Warren and Ron Wyden sent a letter to Kennedy just yesterday. They asked him to recuse himself from all matters related to HHS-regulated entities that are involved in cases or litigation that he and his family have interest in. So with all of that, let's bring in CBS News congressional correspondent Caitlin Huey-Burns to make sense of all of this for us. And Caitlin, thanks for being here first off. This letter comes after Kennedy disclosed that he had financial interest from a law firm suing Merck over the Gardasil vaccine. If he does not agree to this list of commitments outlined by the senators, will he have enough votes to actually advance to the next process?
Yeah, and this was a line of questioning that we saw at his committee hearing last week from Senator Warren pushing this. But really, this comes down to whether he does have enough support from Republicans. We don't anticipate that Democrats are going to cross over and support RFK Jr., but what he can't afford is to lose more than 3 Republican senators on this. And someone that we were watching very closely last week at the hearings was Senator Bill Cassidy of Louisiana. He's actually a physician, and he was pressing RFK Jr., especially on his position and past statements about vaccine and vaccine safety. And watching that hearing last week, it was difficult to tell where Cassidy was. He himself hasn't engaged in questions outside of those hearings about where he stands on RFK Jr. We're really watching how he votes in this committee process. If he supports him, then that shows that he does have some padding there to move forward. But of all of the contentious nominees, it's really RFK Jr. and Tulsi Gabbard, Trump's pick to lead national intelligence, to that department. Those are the most at jeopardy here when you're looking at the totality of these nominees.
Okay, so Caitlin, let's talk about another nominee here, because in just a few hours, senators are set to hold a vote on Pam Bondi's confirmation. What are things looking like here? Is she going to make it through?
Yeah, pretty good for her. It would be very, very surprising if she didn't move through here. Republicans have been largely united around her since it was announced that she would be the pick. So really no contention there. We're also watching Trump's pick to be FBI Director Kash Patel, who also had his first confirmation hearing last week. Republicans are very united around him as well. So soon we could have these top Justice Department positions filled.
And Caitlin, while we have you here, tariffs clearly already getting a lot of attention on the Hill this week. Senator Mitch McConnell had this to say during an interview with CBS News 60 Minutes. Let's listen in.
What about tariffs against our allies?
It will drive the cost of everything up. In other words, it'll be paid for by American consumers. I mean, why would you want to get in a fight with your allies over this?
And we know there's already a change today involving Mexico and tariffs. But Caitlin, what are GOP members? What are they saying? How are they responding to these tariffs?
Well, it's such a fascinating discussion because if you take what Mitch McConnell said there, that's a really traditional Republican stance when it comes to tariffs. But this is an administration, a president that has talked about imposing these tariffs for the entirety of his presidential campaign and is really kind of putting lawmakers on the Republican side of the aisle in a little bit of a bind here. And what was really notable is, some of the responses up here on Capitol Hill. For example, Chuck Grassley, senior senator from Iowa. He raised concern today about the impact some of these tariffs on Canada could have on a particular fertilizer that Iowa farmers use in his state. You also, though, heard from some House Republicans from the Agriculture Committee saying that they liked Trump imposing or threatening these tariffs to get a better deal on other policy items. So what you have here on Capitol Hill is a Republican Party that is united behind the president, even when he kind of goes against their, traditional way of thinking about tariffs. They're inclined to give him the benefit of the doubt. However, you are seeing a little bit of pressure applied. And this messaging, especially from someone like Grassley, saying, look, I hope that this isn't affected here. I hope there can be a solution when it comes to these tariffs. That's really their way of kind of signaling to this White House, look, we are a little bit concerned about what this could mean and what impact this could have in our state. Now, that announcement, when it pertains to Mexico at least, puts a pause on these tariffs for at least a month. So we'll see, that seems to have satiated the concerns here on Capitol Hill. But again, this is something to watch because Trump said over and over and over again that tariff is his favorite word in the dictionary. He's not afraid to use them, and he's not afraid to use the threat. And today, at least, from the White House point of view, they believe that they were able to exert this kind of pressure on Mexico to get what they wanted, at least for now.
All right, Caitlin Huey-Burns, thank you so much for your time today. We appreciate it. Many businesses across the U.S. will close their doors today to protest President Trump's new immigration crackdown. They hope to show how important immigrants are in our economy. And all of this comes after more nationwide protests yesterday in response to the rise in ICE raids and deportations. And now to Texas, where Governor Greg Abbott just gave the National Guard sweeping new power to make immigration arrests. The governor gave the order under an agreement with President Donald Trump. It gives the Texas National Guard the authority to make immigration arrests immediately, but only if a U.S. immigration officer is present. And in Minneapolis, jury selection just began today for the woman accused of running a $250 million scheme to exploit the COVID pandemic. Prosecutors say Amy Brock was the ringleader of a scheme to steal millions from a program meant to feed children. She's one of 70 defendants being tried in pandemic-related fraud cases. To the Pacific Northwest now, and take a look at this. It is the first snow of winter. Seattle's seeing that right now. It looks really beautiful unless you have to drive in it, right, Jess?
Oh my gosh, if you're driving through it, you're probably thinking, can I just call out today? All right, here's what's happening for us. We head over into the Pacific Northwest, and just along the west coast, an atmospheric river is really starting to strengthen as we head into the next 24 hours, bringing with it heavy amounts of rain close to the Bay Area near San Francisco and San Jose. But we're also seeing snowy, chilly conditions too throughout some of the higher elevations throughout the Pacific Northwest. For example, the Cascades all the way over into the Sierras as well. So take a look behind me. Here's what's happening. As we head into the next 24 hours, the strong atmospheric river continues to impact millions all throughout this coastline. Now we could see up to around 10 inches of rain locally, just in higher portions closer to the border of Oregon and California, but we're also seeing pretty heavy amounts of snow too. Wind watches and warnings are in effect right now. We're also seeing a lot of flood watches fill the Bay Area, where they can expect anywhere up to around 3 inches, but we can see 10 inches locally in some of those higher peaks closer to Redding, California, or Crescent City. You head over into the Cascades, they're anticipating to see about 2 feet of snow just within the next 48 hours. You head all the way down to the Sierra. Oh, they are in luck. All of our friends over into the Sierra Tahoe region, they're expecting plenty of snow as we head into the next 48 hours, which is great news because it's been relatively a dry month. The winds are the only big concern, of course, too, with this. We can see gusts up to around 40 miles per hour at times, the big reason why they have wind advisories. But this is the atmospheric river season that we've kind of been holding out for, and now we're starting to see it. So yes, it's going to impact the coastline, but we'll keep a close eye on those rainfall totals.
A little bit of discomfort here and there, but it's worth it. It's that time of year.
Yeah,
I mean, this is going to happen.
Yep.
Thank
California.
you so much, Jess. And we could be paying more for everyday goods. Details on President Trump's tariffs next. You're watching CBS News 24/7. And we have breaking news from the White House. Moments ago, President Donald Trump signed an executive order to begin the process for the creation of an American sovereign wealth fund. Trump says the fund will be up and running within the next year, and the goal here is to monetize the assets listed in the U.S. balance sheet. This fund could also purchase TikTok. Trump appointed Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent and Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick to head up that fund. And also coming from that meeting, the president announced 5 designations of special envoys and 28 sub-cabinet level official appointments. Meanwhile, President Trump has agreed to hold off on tariff threats against Mexico to allow for a month of negotiations. The pause came after the Mexican president agreed to send 10,000 members of her country's National Guard to the border to address drug trafficking. However, import taxes on Canada and China are still a go for Tuesday. CBS News national security contributor Sam Vinograd joins us live now to discuss the tariffs. Sam, thank you so much for being here. What do you make of this shift from the White House?
Well, we do have a temporary tariff truce when it comes to the United States and Mexico. But as of now, it does look like tariffs will go into effect targeting one of the United States' closest allies, Canada. If we take a step back, we have to remember that we are at an unprecedented moment. The convergence of trade policy, immigration policy, counter-narcotics, and foreign policy has really never been higher. President Trump is using his executive authority under legislation known as IEPA to implement tariffs for the first time in history, not based on economic concerns with Canada, Mexico, and China, but based on counter-narcotic and immigration-related concerns. This really hasn't happened before and is an unprecedented moment in history. Now, while the tariffs with Mexico are on hold ostensibly for a month, we are still looking at tariffs going into effect against Canada, against China, and President Trump is also threatening to look at implementing tariffs against the European Union. So he is using his executive authority to implement these punitive measures on an incredibly broad range of imports into the United States, which are expected to significantly raise costs for Americans and to really shake up how our allies and adversaries view the predictability of our tariff tools and our foreign policy assurances as well.
Okay, Sam, you mentioned China there, so let's focus on that for a second. What could the fallout be from tariffs with China?
Well, China right now is threatening to take this action by President Trump to the World Trade Organization, which likely won't have a lot of teeth based upon the inefficacy of that body. What we could see is a series of retaliatory measures by China targeting U.S. exports to the United States, but also asymmetrical responses whereby China takes steps to harass and intimidate U.S. businesses operating in China, U.S. personnel, and more. So we could see actual retaliatory actions by China that are symmetrical, or more asymmetrical actions by China to try to really bully the United States to take a step back from this imposition of 10% tariffs.
And just so we're clear, we're not just talking about China, Canada, and Mexico here. Trump has also threatened Europe with tariffs to align with his legislative priorities. What could be the fallout there?
Well, in terms of goods, services, and investment, the European Union is the United States' largest trading partner. And Trump has for some time railed against the European Union's trade deficit with the United States. More recently, he's focused a lot on EU auto exports to the United States, which is a direct dig at Germany. He did impose tariffs against the EU in his first term on steel and aluminum. But this time around, the EU is in a very different position. Since at least this summer, the European Union has been preparing a list of its own retaliatory measures that it could use to target the United States. And so if Trump moves ahead with tariffs against the European Union, I think we'll see two steps take place. The first is the EU could come back and pledge to buy more U.S. goods like liquefied natural gas, for example, to try to reduce the trade deficit, while concurrently also targeting very specific U.S. exports to the EU that they know will hit at Trump in red states where he gets a lot of support. So they've been preparing for this for some time and won't be sitting around waiting for Trump to take punitive action with no response of their own.
All right, Sam Vinograd, thank you so much for your insight today. We appreciate it. Let's dig a little deeper now on President Trump's decision to pause tariffs on Mexico. Trump agreed to the 1-month pause after reaching a deal with the president of Mexico. Correspondent Jason Allen takes us to a trade hub in Texas to talk about the logistics of that agreement and what it means for border communities.
We're here at the World Trade Bridge in Laredo. This is a place where 40% of the goods between Mexico and the U.S. pass back and forth. It is essential to this international trade. And as you see the trucks that are moving back and forth between the countries, the mayor expressed to me yesterday that what he saw with tariffs was, well, he described it as potentially a game of chicken to see who was going to move first on something that could so substantially impact this trade in North America. Well, it does appear now, according to posts from Mexico, the president of Mexico, that there has been an agreement to put these tariffs on pause, at least for a month. So just 12 to 14 hours before they were set to go in effect, they are on pause. This comes after discussions between the two countries and an agreement that both of them will work on security and trade. Mexico's president says they will surge as many as 10,000 troops to the border. That is to work on preventing drugs from crossing into the United States, especially fentanyl, something President Trump has been concerned about. The Trump administration has in turn agreed to do what it can to prevent the movement of high-powered weapons over into Mexico, weapons that would potentially go to the drug cartel. And the big headline then, because of that agreement, is that the tariffs have been put on pause for a month. Now, in talking with logistics and transportation experts, they expected that if tariffs did go into effect, it would be a few days as everybody figured out how this was going to work. Would they stay? Would companies accept some of that extra cost? How much would they pass on to the consumer? Once you get past a week, that's when they felt you could see some of the bigger, larger effects. Higher prices, maybe trucking would slow down, maybe warehouse jobs would slow down, and there could potentially be a ripple effect away from these border communities across the country and across North America. But for now, those tariffs appear to be on a pause for a month as all countries, Canada, the United States, and Mexico, continue to talk. Back to you.
Meanwhile, about 600 miles outside of Laredo, newly confirmed Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth arrives at the U.S.-Mexico border in Fort Bliss, Texas. It's his first trip since taking office. Hegseth says President Trump wants 100% operational control of the border, and he is there to deliver. The visit reinforces border security will be a top priority for the Pentagon under President Donald Trump. Questionnaires are being sent to FBI agents who worked on the January 6th Capitol riot cases. Why and what could come next? Ahead on CBS News 24/7. President Trump backing down on that threat to impose tariffs on Mexico for now. But that 25% tariff on Canada still stands and is expected to go into effect after midnight. According to Axios, economists agree on one thing. These tariffs will, quote, cost the average American household hundreds, if not thousands of dollars every year. Let's break down where this will affect your wallet. Tariffs on Canada, Mexico, or China could directly increase costs on everyday items like food, cars, and even electronics. But one item on that list consumers may not really think about is the cost of lumber. A warning here from the National Association of Home Builders says tariffs on building materials like lumber will raise construction costs and harm housing affordability. Last hour, we spoke to the president and CEO of that organization, and he had this to say.
When we look at lumber in particular, Canada is our #1 trading partner when it comes to lumber. About 30% of our lumber used in home building comes from Canada. There's currently about a 15% tariff already on Canadian lumber. When you add on this new 25% tariff, now we're looking at a 40% price increase. And there's even chance that over the summer, as we move into the building, fully into the building season, additional costs may go up. We could look at 50 or 55% to the cost of any stick of lumber coming into this country from Canada. So it's going to have a significant impact on home construction. In fact, we just saw today that futures for lumber are at their highest point since the election. So the volatility is already starting to take place in that market.
We know more than 70% of the imports of 2 essential construction materials come from Canada and Mexico. The president and Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau will hold another phone call on this in just a few hours. The White House is going beyond pardons when it comes to the fallout from the January 6th Capitol riot. Right now, FBI agents across the country are under the microscope and being asked to answer questions about their role in investigating those cases. CBS News Department of Justice correspondent Scott McFarland joins us now. Scott, thank you for being here. We know agents are expected to receive questionnaires, but what do those questions look like? Do we know?
And some of these questions are particularly specific and granular to try to figure out what role these agents or FBI employees played in the January 6th investigations, the largest criminal investigation in U.S. history. We know from our CBS News reporting this could impact as many as 5,000 employees inside the FBI, a truly bonkers number. And the January 6 investigations, unlike so many other FBI probes, actually touched every single FBI field office across the country. This is not a Washington, D.C. issue. This is a nationwide issue. And the deadline was set for mid-afternoon today for those employees to complete this questionnaire and submit it to their supervisors. Then there's a deadline tomorrow, 12 p.m. Eastern Time, for the FBI to hand over all those names and potentially all those records to the interim leadership of the U.S. Department of Justice. This has been a tumultuous 24 hours inside the Bureau, and it'll be another tumultuous 24 hours to come. There is concern that there is a blackballing of January 6th investigating agents that is about to happen and to a degree has already started.
Yeah, Scott, and speaking of those concerns, are they also concerns that this probe could lead to mass firings within the FBI and at field offices across the country?
Yeah, FBI and Department of Justice memos reviewed by CBS News say among those names that are provided, those lists of names of those who investigated January 6th to the Department of Justice, there can be future employment actions against some of those employees, if not many of those employees. So yeah, there's a concern that having touched the January 6th cases could lead to a forced retirement, resignation, or firing. But there's a more pernicious and fundamental issue here that's playing out this afternoon in Washington. There is a broader concern that simply going through this process, having your name named, having questions asked about your role in January 6th is going to have a chilling effect on the FBI and its agents to be careful what they investigate in the future, that if it doesn't meet with the White House's approval, that those types of investigations are going to be frowned upon. That is an historic, absolute breach of the traditional independent relationship between the FBI, the Department of Justice, and the White House, perhaps cementing a change into how federal law enforcement functions, where they're supposed to be independently choosing their cases and pursuing their cases, not looking for political approval in advance.
And Scott, I think you just answered my next question there, but just how unusual is it to see FBI agents being questioned like this?
This is unique in the FBI's history and has ramifications on the front lines. Take a listen to Frank Figluzzi, a longtime FBI employee, now retired, who spoke with Face the Nation yesterday.
You are starting to lose too much experience. And if this plays out next week, as reportedly it might, with regard to dismissing hundreds or thousands of special agents in the field who have touched January 6 cases or Trump-related cases, this makes America less safe. This is not reduction. This is not efficiency. It makes America less safe when you lose that much expertise this quickly. Interestingly enough, both the acting director and acting assistant director would be on that list. They both worked Jan 6 related cases or Trump related cases. So we've got a potential standoff that's here. But yes, line agents did nothing outside of the law or attorney general guidelines. They simply worked criminal cases, in many cases gained convictions and guilty pleas. And if they were literally all to be pushed out the door, we would be talking about thousands of FBI agents. There's only 14,000 agents in the field, and we'd be talking close to 6,000 of them who worked such cases.
No matter if there are mass terminations, this whole enterprise has damaged, if not destroyed, morale and sown distrust inside federal law enforcement.
Yeah, a lot to come out of this one. Scott McFarlane, thank you so much for your time today. The Super Bowl just days away, and safety, of course, is a big focus in New Orleans. How officials plan to keep fans safe. You're watching CBS News 24/7. It is the official start of Super Bowl week. The two-time defending champs, Kansas City Chiefs, will take on the Philadelphia Eagles at the New Orleans Superdome on Sunday. The newly sworn-in U.S. Secretary of Homeland Security, Kristi Noem, arrived in New Orleans today. They talked about safety measures in place ahead of the Super Bowl.
And we plan for it to be an exciting event, one that will be safe, that we will have the best team win, but also that people come here, have a memorable experience, that they'll be able to go home and be able to appreciate the fact that this city not only welcomes people and takes care of them on their worst days, but also allows them to come back and to be safe. What I'm going to ask is everybody respect your law enforcement officers, that you respect public safety. We are a nation of laws, and there's consequences for breaking those laws. So as we go forward and we plan big events like this, we are going to make sure that we have safe events and that we're partnering together with federal agencies, with state agencies, and with local agencies.
A United Airlines flight leaving from Houston had to evacuate after an engine sparked fire on a wing. Someone on board took a video of the moment passengers noticed that issue. Let's take a listen.
Oh my God. Please get us out of here.
United Airlines says the pilot stopped the takeoff after getting an engine warning. The aircraft stayed on the runway while passengers used the slides and stairs to evacuate the plane. No one was injured. The FAA is investigating the incident. A case involving Blake Lively and her It Ends With Us co-star Justin Baldoni hits court today. This comes after Lively accused Baldoni of sexual harassment and retaliation back in December. Baldoni denied the allegations and filed a lawsuit against Lively and her husband, Ryan Reynolds, accusing them of defamation and invasion of privacy. Neither Lively nor Baldoni is expected to be in court today. A stretch of an iconic coastal highway in Southern California reopened this morning, almost a month after wildfires sparked in LA County. But the Pacific Coast Highway isn't fully open to the public just yet. People who live or work in the area need access passes to get through National Guard checkpoints. That's it for us today on this Monday. You're watching CBS News 24/7. Have a great day, everyone.